Hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of the Life Beats Project. We are recording again live in the Sturry Studios. I'm so excited to be able to have Jodi Orgill Brown with me today for this episode. So, Jodi, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Good, I love it. I've been able to listen to some of her presentations and her videos online, and so I feel like I already know you. Be able to hear your voice. I recognize your voice outside over here.
As soon as I started talking
yes, you started talking. So I love it, and so we're going to be able to share a lot of Jodi's story, which is quite, there's so much to it. It has a lot of depth, as well as some of the things that have happened recently in her life. And Jodi is an author and a speaker and a nonprofit consultant. And so she has a lot of wisdom and a lot of life experience that she's going to be able to share with us today. So Jodi, for our viewers and our listeners that don't know you yet, I'd love for you to just share just a little bit about you now and maybe some things you enjoy and a little bit about your family.
A little about me now.
Yeah.
Oh. I think in this second half of my life, I am a little bit more adventurous in some ways than I used to be because I'm all about having experiences, trying new things.
I love that. Me too.
I'm a huge foodie now because I can taste food again. And for quite a long time, I had lost my taste buds. And so when you go from not having something to having it again, it creates a whole new adventure. So I'm very adventurous with food.
Good.
I like all sorts of things, and I will go anywhere to get food. So,
oh, that's great. What's the most adventurous thing you've eaten recently?
Ooh. I don't know that recently there's been anything super adventurous, although my son did recently shoot a duck, and then he prepared it and cooked it, and we all participated.
That sounds very adventurous.
But really, I think one of my big things is just I enjoy spending time with my family. I enjoy doing new things, maybe pushing myself a little bit just so I can remember that I'm still alive and that I'm still going, and I can push myself physically. But then also I have to remember to be careful, do things in the appropriate amounts and the appropriate time frames. But so I've been trying to pick up things that I used to do, like water skiing, and some things that I used to take for granted that were gone from my life for a while, and hiking and anything outdoors. I'm a real outdoors person. I love the water. I love the mountains. I love the trees. I will bring them, drag them to my house, and display them wherever I can because I'm all about nature. So
that's great. Well, Utah is a good place for you to live.
It is. It's
so did you grow up here in Utah?
I did not. I grew up on the East Coast.
On the East Coast.
I grew up in Northern Virginia, which is also a great place if you like the outdoors because it's
beautiful.
Rolling hills and green trees, and to the point where the street that I lived on was covered in a tunnel of trees, and you would go through the tunnel to get down to my cul-de-sac. So that's probably why I'm an outdoors nut.
Yeah.
It's because I grew up playing in the woods.
It's a connection for you.
Absolutely. Playing in the creek in the backyard and catching crawdads and turtles and bringing them home. You never knew what we were going to bring to our house and keep for a pet on the box.
So have you found that you've encouraged that adventurous spirit in your own children?
I feel like we've tried. We take them outside, get out and away from just normal everyday life as much as we can. We love to go up to the mountains. We love to go. We have a family cabin in Montana. We love to go there. There's no internet connection. There's no television. There's no radio. You have nothing. We don't have a TV there. We have nothing. And so you just become immersed in the outdoors. And I love that.
And each other, I'm sure.
And each other. And you share experiences and adventures together that you wouldn't if you were home and you each had your devices and you were doing the normal stuff. So I love to get away from that.
That's good.
And experience life.
Yeah, well, I can imagine after learning a lot of your story that I would think for me, and even looking at my own experiences, that I have a greater, I guess, gratitude for the everyday living now than I did, before kind of hitting a rock bottom period in my life. And I imagine that could be for you as well, that appreciation.
Appreciation, I would say, not only for just the everyday things, but for what may have once been everyday relationships. No relationship to me is one that should be taken for granted now, because whether it's just your neighbor or just the person down the street, there is no just. These are the people that make up your community and that provide you a support system. And I think every relationship that I had changed immediately upon experiencing some of the challenges that I did. And I try very hard not to take any relationship for granted now.
I love that so much, and I feel like it speaks to so much of what we communicate here at the Life Beats Project, that value and worth of every soul, and valuing those interactions that we have with one another. And I think that's a beautiful way to live, and it's such an enriching way to be able to live and to be able to connect with other people. So,
and I think the ultimate goal is for us to realize each individually that every other person that we come in contact with has a life as rich and deep and complicated, and their experiences are every bit as real for them as ours are for us.
Yes.
And not to see people as just the driver in the car next to us or the idiot that just cut us off, but to realize that they have their own real experiences and backgrounds and struggles, and that we're each that way. And if we took the time to see that, wouldn't all of life be a little bit better?
Oh, it absolutely would be. And I think that's something, that we strive to do, and being able to interview amazing people like you, and who's somebody maybe to see you at the grocery store and they don't know your story, but to be able to give a platform, an opportunity for people to understand and hear people's stories, to see that we are more alike than we are different.
That is exactly what I believe, and I love that.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to dive into your story a little bit more. And there is so much, but I'd love to be able to have people kind of understand the depth of the experiences that you've had. And I loved how you kind of framed this world that you were living in at a time where you called it your white picket fence world. And maybe just kind of take us in that moment, maybe give us a view of what that looked like to you.
Sure. What is everyone's great American dream? It's to live in that house with the little white picket fence and to be having the perfect little family and doing all of the things that you dreamed of doing. And I think that's where I was, as I was working in the nonprofit field, which is something that I've always been passionate about, working to help other people. And I had 4 little kids, was loving my experience as a mom, have a husband who's been my best friend for, years. And it just seemed like everything was going really well. In fact, I really can say at this point in time that I had achieved almost all of the goals that I'd set for my whole life.
Wow,
I was at the point where, I'd done the schools and the degrees and the certifications and was working in the field I wanted. And I had this little family and I was doing these things. And so from the outside, everything looked pretty darn picture perfect. But as we all know, rarely is that picture. Right. That picture is not perfect. Even it was probably photoshopped or something.
So what was it that started to kind of maybe break down that fence a little bit?
When I look back now, I can see that it wasn't any one thing. It was a series of things, which now I know to be a series of symptoms, which I did not recognize at the time. They came to me one at a time, and because they hit one at a time, I didn't recognize that it was part of something bigger. But a series of symptoms, including severe dizzy spells, and then vertigo, and then debilitating headaches, which for some people, headaches are a part of their lives, and my heart reaches out to you. But for those who aren't headache people, which I had not been a headache person, that was a real, something's going on.
Yeah.
So, that caused me to go to the doctor, and I actually went to the doctor with each one of these different symptoms, but individually, hey, I'm having dizzy spells, hey, I'm having vertigo, and didn't realize that there was something bigger going on because I saw things as individual instead of seeing them as, all part of the same problem. And so it wasn't for months and months did we get to the root of the problem and realize that there was one main cause and they weren't individual things. So everything from dizzy spells to headaches to ringing in the ears, I originally saw as just little cracks in my fence, but didn't understand that it was part of something bigger originally.
So when did that come? When did that moment come where you realized that these may be interconnected and there was something serious that needed to be addressed, and maybe you needed to push the doctors a little bit more that were just kind of dismissing these things?
My husband came home from work one day, and I had been having a particularly difficult day, not feeling well. I could hardly walk down the hall because I was too dizzy. And so when he asked me how I was and I told him about my day, he looked at me and he said, something is wrong. Something is really wrong, and we need to figure this out. And so I called and made an appointment with the doctor and went back to the doctor. This would have been my 4th time visiting the doctor in that year, trying to figure out what was going on. And just told him, I think there's something really wrong, and we need to start looking for the answers. So we went through all of the normal tests that you would go through, blood work and family histories. And a few days later, they called me back and said, hey, we got your blood work back and everything looks good. You're good. And by that time I knew I wasn't good. I didn't know what the root cause was, but I knew that there was something going on. And so I did have to push and say, hey, no, we can't stop here. We have to see what is next. And so I asked, I said, what's the next step that we take? And at that point in time, based on the variety of the symptoms I had, they said the next step is an MRI of your brain. And that was where we really got an indication of
and
what
how
our
did
battle
that
was.
feel that was your next step? I mean, did you feel alarmed at this moment, or how were you feeling?
No, I didn't feel alarmed. I have always been just like a get her done girl.
Yeah.
I saw this in just the list of things I needed to check off to, okay, we're going to do this, and then we're going to eliminate these things, and then we're going to do this, and we're just going to get down to the bottom of this. We're going to figure it out, and we're going to go back, and I'm going to go back to my normal life. So I wasn't alarmed, and I wasn't nervous. In fact, I didn't even tell anyone in my family. Only my husband knew I was going to have the MRI. Some of my family members knew about some of the symptoms I'd been having, but I didn't even let anyone know I was going, back into the doctor or into the hospital. So I went in not really being afraid of it. Even after the process, I wasn't nervous about it until the MRI tech called me back into the room. Like I hadn't been out of the machine for 5 minutes, and I was in the locker room getting dressed, and she ran in and said, hey, can we talk to you for a minute? And that was a little bit of an indication that something more was going on.
Yeah. So how did you feel at that moment? Did you start having all those worries? I can imagine you probably aren't the type of person that has all the worries come in, but I think that would be very natural for a lot of people to start thinking, okay, what's really going on?
I still didn't start to worry yet. Part of that was out of ignorance and naivety. I didn't know. And so they said they had seen a spot on my brain and they wanted to take a better look. So they hooked me back up and gave me some contrast dye so they could take a better look at the scans. And when I was in the machine for the second time, the thought that kept going through my mind, I thought, a spot on my brain. So what does that mean?
Yeah,
I don't know what that means. But then there was part of me that actually felt validated. Like, I knew something was going on.
Yes, I can imagine.
I knew something was wrong. Now we're going to figure out what it is. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to fix it. And honestly, move on.
Right.
And that was the only thing I really thought during the MRI. And again, my little wake-up call came when I got out of the MRI machine for the second time. And this time, the MRI tech, she leaned down to unhook, all the head restraints and everything, and she helped me sit up. And as I stood up, she actually put her arms around me and said, there is definitely something there. Go home and call your doctor immediately. And good luck to you. And I thought, what? She clearly knew something that I didn't know. And I got a little glimpse of that. And that was probably when some of the anxieties and the what-ifs started to settle into my mind.
Yeah, I can imagine. And for someone that probably sees a lot of those type of scans, and for her to have that emotional connection with you and want to communicate that with you, how in tune that person must have been to be able to reach out to you and express that. And
knowing that an hour before we had been joking with each other and it had been on a very different level. And also knowing that technically they're supposed to be very careful with what they're even allowed to say.
Yes.
And I recognized that she was trying to help me and prepare me and give me a little strength for the battle.
Yeah. Well, I loved it. In listening to, we did a Facebook Live here in the Sturry studio, or a Sturry office another time, and I was listening to that, and I loved that you shared that one of the most important lessons that you've learned through this whole process is the power of the individual and what they can bring to life and to other people by the things that they experience, the knowledge that they have, the unique properties that make them them.
Yes.
And so I can see that manifested in just that moment with that technician, that she had that to offer for you.
And over again at different moments when something specific was needed, or when we were in a circumstance that we didn't know what to do, or needed a specific kind of help, and all of a sudden the person with the right credentials and expertise just came into the picture, and I started realizing, okay, we can write it off or think that, oh yeah, we all know we're all unique, we all know we're all special, we're all winners, right? Because our kids hear that so much, all the trophies lined up.
Right, yeah, all the trophies.
But the reality is, I really can contribute to so many different individuals. The fact that I'm still alive, because someone with the right knowledge, with the right contact, with this, set of skills or relationships or networks did something at the right time. Yeah. And by reaching out, it really did truly save a life. And so I don't discount that anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love it. And you were saying that, I'm also thinking of one of the keynotes that I watched for you when you talked about karma and that last A for her name, talking about authentic and talking about that meaning that you being you. And I think that's such an important message for everyone to remember, is that you being you is the best thing that you can be in offering up to other people yourself. And I think we have this idea that what I have to offer is not enough, or it's not special enough or unique enough, but us being able to be in our role. Like in our church, there's a phrase that we use, lift where you stand, and that you are you for a reason, and you have these unique gifts and these unique situations and circumstances that make you you. And if you can just exercise that and have confidence in that and move forward in that, how beautiful your life is because of what you share with other people.
I'm an absolute believer in that. I think I have very mixed feelings about some of the things that I see in social media these days, because it makes me a little nervous that I like, on the one hand, that you can be you and you can share your voice. I think that we have more opportunity to share our voices than ever before. But it also makes me a little nervous because so many young people are looking at someone else's voice and just trying to imitate it. And they become it's like pressing play, and you're just putting someone else's voice on repeat. And I see that even in our home with my little kids. They watch a show on YouTube or see something, and then they just repeat it and repeat it.
Yeah, my kids do the same thing.
Do you. Be you. Don't try to always be someone else. Don't try and imitate what someone else is or what they do.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big reasons I love the outdoors and connecting with nature, because it takes you away from all of those other things and helps you really think more internally, connect with something that's bigger than you, and really discover a little bit more about who you are as a person and find that voice.
I love that. I've never looked at it quite like that. And I do. I've always felt a connection to God when I've been there, and I've felt a peace, but I haven't been able to articulate it like you just said. I feel like it does remove that I guess that distraction of comparison to other people, and it really just allows you to come back to yourself. So I thank you for explaining
it that way. When you're playing in the water or climbing a tree or hiking, you're not doing that. You are in the moment, and you're hopefully enjoying what's around you, and just creating experiences that build you. And I think that's one of the things that I love, and I want my children and all of the youth to have is, put everything away and go play in the woods.
Yeah. Get lost in the woods, kids.
Right. It's not a bad thing.
Right. Oh, I love that. Well, at that moment when that technician told you that, and what did you do after that? I'm guessing you did go home, you did make that phone call. What did that situation look like, and how did your husband react to that?
When I pulled in the garage, my husband popped his head out the door and said, "Hey, you're home. It took a lot longer than I expected." And I had to take a deep breath and think, how am I going to say this? And I intentionally didn't call him on my cell phone on the way home because I needed a little time to process for myself and know what I was going to say. And so I just carefully tried to relay. I said, "Okay, we need to go in the kitchen and talk." And so I just walked in and I just said, "They found something on the scan. They found a spot on my brain." And my husband is an engineer, and he is 90 8% analytical, I would say. So he went into let's figure it out mode. And so he started trying to find a solution. Okay, well, what can we do? What is it? Is it a tumor? Is it this? What can we do? Can we chemo? Can we radiate it? Can we get it out of there? Can we do a biopsy? What is it? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't have any of these answers yet. And so then he picked up the phone and handed it to me and said, okay, then call your doctor and let's start finding out. So he's also a very optimistic person, so he didn't go into panic mode. I think he went into solve the problem mode, which was good. I think it's good that we looked at it from that approach. Now I've come to understand the phrase ignorance is bliss, because it's good that you don't know everything going in, because I think it would make some challenges even more difficult if you knew all of the experts know.
Yeah. And so you had that moment where you had to make that phone call. And between the time that you made that phone call and the diagnosis there and a solution for that, there was a large gap. Is that correct?
The phone call was a short period of time. So I had the MRI, and by that afternoon, I talked to my doctor on the phone.
Wow.
And this is one thing I learned, is that in the medical field, things can go very, very slowly. But when something is wrong, they can move really quickly. And so by the time I talked to him on the phone, it had probably been maybe 5 or 6 hours had passed since I had gone to get the MRI, which felt like a lifetime.
Right, I'm
waiting.
sure, yes.
But in reality, you know, normally you wait at least several days to get any kind of results for any kind of procedure. So I feel like I was fortunate to at least get a hold of him that day. And it was one of those conversations and moments that are forever frozen in my mind, where he just said, Mrs. Brown, I don't even know what to say, but I'm reading the information from the MRI and from the radiologist, and it appears you have a tumor or a mass between the end of your auditory canal and your brainstem. And he started saying so many things that went into the medical that I realized I don't know what he's talking about. So I grabbed a pencil and just started writing everything down. And then as soon as we got off the phone, I did what anyone would do, and I Googled it.
Oh my gosh, I know. Oh, we do that, don't we?
It's a little bit scary at that moment.
It is.
So I did see how quickly things moved, and by that afternoon, the doctor's office called me back, and they said, we have an appointment set up for you with a neurosurgeon on Monday. I said, wait, this Monday? Yes, you have an 8 a.m. appointment on Monday. This was a Friday afternoon.
Oh my gosh.
End of the work week on Easter weekend. And that was also indication to me. He said, I explained the situation to the neurosurgeon, and he rearranged his schedule to fit you in. And I immediately thought, you explained the situation. Again, there's something that you know that I don't know. That was a hint at some of the things to come. So Monday actually ended up being Tuesday, because the neurosurgeon had an emergency he had to take care of. So we went on Tuesday, and it was Tuesday when I sat across from the neurosurgeon, and he said, Mrs. Brown, in the brain it's all about location, location, location. And I'm sorry to say, but your tumor is in a very bad location. And proceeded to say that because of the proximity to the brainstem, that there was really not anything that could be done.
Oh my gosh.
That they wouldn't be able to treat it. They wouldn't even be able to biopsy it, because it was just too dangerous. He said it would be just as dangerous to go in and biopsy as it would be to try and remove. And so my husband and I fired question after question. And eventually he looked at us and just said, I'm sorry, but I would not touch you with a 10-foot pole.
Oh my gosh.
And my first thought was, did you really just say that to me?
Oh my word. Oh my gosh.
Where's your bedside manner?
Right.
Like, I am a real person.
Yes.
And these words have real repercussions.
Yeah.
And when we stepped out of the office, what do you do? Where do you go from there?
You collapse.
You collapse. And you cry, and you figure out how to pick up the pieces and what to do next. And the one thing he did say was that he would forward my information to a group that was comprised of all of the experts in the region, not just in. Where were you
living at this time?
So I was living in Ogden, Utah.
Okay.
And was in one particular healthcare system that had been seeing me initially. And this group was amongst all of the leaders in the field outside of any one particular healthcare group. And so this was going to include leaders from many different places and healthcare systems. And that ended up being a lifesaver for me, because the first entire healthcare system that I went to pretty much said I was inoperable and there was nothing they could do for me.
Oh, gosh.
So that was a daunting thing. And how do you go home to your children and to your family and to your life and pretend like everything's okay?
Yeah. And what did you do at that time? I mean, I can imagine there's lots of collapsing and crying. And was there any sort of, I don't know, I just mean, was there that moment where you can remember just like maybe breathing deep and just saying, okay, I have to do this? You know, was there any kind of realization for you where you were able to sort of set aside that emotion and kind of see, okay, now what do I do?
I think we actually did that over and over and over again.
Yes,
like we kind of had to do it every day with every new situation. And we started to research, other doctors and other solutions and figure out, well, surely maybe this doctor doesn't know how to do it, but someone else can, or someone else has faced this situation. And we started researching and reaching out. And my family is very well connected because some of the jobs that my father has had, and he reached out to his very vast network of people. And I hadn't even been aware at the time that he had done this, but he sent out a message and just said, we're facing a family crisis and we would love, your help, your prayers, and any connections that you might have. And what a beautiful little miracle that ended up being, that all these people started reaching back. People who knew my family started offering help and resources. And so literally my head was examined around the world, and they sent scans everywhere you can think of, from Johns Hopkins to the Mayo Clinic, and experts all over the place were looking and trying to provide solutions and offer scenarios that they thought might help. And that provided a big boost.
That's great.
So we had those moments, and I still, honestly, I thought, well, surely, these people had a hard time, or it didn't turn out so well for them. But, this is me.
Right. Yes. Well, I love that about you, that optimism that you have.
And it was naive optimism, but I needed that. I really think I needed that, and I think it was critically important to have going in, so that I felt like we were going to go in and conquer this and that everything was going to be okay. I think that was a really important part of my survival.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like for me, a lot of the survival comes from that hope as well as the inner self-talk, really helping me. Okay, I can do this. This is the step I need to take. All right, I'm handling this a little better than I did before. And just that, talking myself through and talking myself to the next step. And I know for me, that's been really helpful.
We definitely have inner voices for a reason, right?
Yeah. Isn't that curious? I really think that is a curious concept of having an inner voice.
I don't know if animals do this, if we're the only ones. Like,
I wonder.
Do they talk themselves through it? I just have 25 more feet to go, and then I'm going to be at my burrow. I don't know. Yeah. But it became an important thing for me, and to learn to trust that voice and to trust what was inside of me, that took me a long time, because for a while, this was a whole new realm for me, and I didn't trust myself. I trusted that everyone else in the system was looking out for my best good, and that they had answers I did not have. And while, of course, that's true, because they had sets of expertise that I did not have, I did learn that only I know what's going on inside of my body, and they only know it if I explain it to them, or if they take pictures of it, or, if they look at it from other points of view. But I have very unique insight that they are not ever going to have. And so the way that I feel and what's happening, and that gut instinct and the things that inner voice is saying, that I needed to listen to that. And that ended up playing a really big role for me. And it took me a long time, especially, I think, because I was such a get-her-done person and had always been type A personality, just this is how things are going to be. And I'm surprised it took me so long, but I think I really did just hand my life over and say, okay, I know that these people are going to just take care of things. And I know that that's what they all tried to do, and that's what they believed they were doing. But I still got to a point where I realized I have to trust what I know is going on in my body, and I can't ignore that.
What do you feel like was the biggest barrier for you to coming to that realization?
Oh, well, probably in the beginning it was knowing that I wasn't an expert in that area. So the areas that I know something about, I'm not shy. I'm probably a little outspoken. I'm fairly confident. I don't hesitate to speak my mind. When it comes to brain surgery,
Right. I get it.
that wasn't one I knew. And so I think I just really depended so much on someone else's knowledge and their experience. And I felt very much, I didn't even speak up for myself in the appointments because, people were like, okay, you're in a neurosurgeon's office. You can only say the most important things. Their time is so valuable and you're paying this many dollars a minute. And only the things that are most important need to be communicated. And at the time, I don't know that I could have said what was the most important thing because I wasn't from that background. And it took me a long time to realize, no, I need to tell you this. I need to talk to you. I need you to listen to me. And I need you to trust what I'm feeling. And that was not something I went in with. And by the time that I was at that point, my inoperable diagnosis had turned operable, and we had found someone who would be willing to operate. And I think by the time I really discovered to trust myself, we were, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks into a hospital stay, and I'd had maybe 3 brain surgeries, and everything had gone wrong, and nothing had gone right, and we realized I had all of these additional complications, including facial paralysis. The right side of my face was paralyzed, hearing loss. I lost the hearing in my right ear, and one of the most dangerous being a cerebrospinal fluid leak, where the spinal fluid that is in your brain and up and down your spine that protects your brain was leaking. That when they had gone in and done the surgery, in sealing everything back up, somewhere there was a hole where some spinal fluid was able to escape. And that fluid was physically leaking out of my nose and down the back of my throat.
Oh, wow.
And so by that point in time, the physical strength that I'd had and the confidence I'd had in myself that way was gone. I was bedridden for weeks and weeks and hardly able to move, and in extreme pain and massive headaches and very, very sick. I was very sick. So. And I think I just kind of turned my life over and assumed, well, these people are going to take care of me and they're going to make it all better. And they almost, there was very much, and I don't know, people who've been in the healthcare system a lot have probably seen this, but there was a point in time where doctors stopped talking to me and they started talking to other people in the room about me.
Wow, yes.
And I just laid there and let them. And I almost felt like I lost my voice for a while, even though it was happening to me. I felt like I was in such a weakened state, mentally, physically, emotionally, in every way. I stopped speaking up for myself. And I know that didn't help me. I don't know, how much it actually hurt, but I know it didn't help me because our voices are powerful and we know what's going on inside ourselves, and we just have to listen to that.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and it is a process, I think, to be able to adopt that confidence and I think sometimes it does take that kind of life-changing moment to be able to propel us forward. And I remember reading on your blog where you very tenderly shared an experience where you felt like you were at that point, like that breaking point where your body couldn't withstand any more pain. And you were at the point where you were ready to just relinquish your life and just thinking, this is it, I'm living my final moments.
Yeah.
And you had received a sort of peace about that. And I'd love for you, if you feel okay, to share just a little bit about that experience and the message that you received and maybe a conviction that you received moving forward from those moments.
It's interesting because I have never been one to not exercise my choice, my ability to decide for myself. I've always made decisions, set goals, followed through with all of those things. And when I got to that moment, by that point in time, I had been in the hospital for 4 weeks and had multiple brain surgeries, and things just had continued to go wrong, and my physical body had just deteriorated to a point where I mean, I had lost, 20 pounds, and I was living on just basic IV fluids and being somewhat artificially sustained. And I think I got to a point where I thought, this is no longer my choice. I was at a moment where I felt like this is what it is. And my choice now is, do I accept this and find peace in it? Or do I spend my last moments, in crisis or upset? And when I realized my body really couldn't take any more, and I felt as though my systems were just shutting down one by one, and I could see things around me that were happening, systems, alarms, and medical personnel running all over the place, and pushing me in and out of machines and into scans, and I could see the phone calls, and I could hear the voices, and I could, I saw my mom's tears and heard bits of a phone call where she rushed out to tell my family, and yet I was totally just inside myself. I don't know that I'd opened my eyes that entire day. I had for a few moments, and I had a couple of interactions earlier, but it just got to a point where I really realized, okay, we get to choose a lot of things in our lives, but we don't always get to choose the end. And from my perspective in that moment, I thought, this is the end, and I just have to choose to be okay with it. And so I really reached out to the universe and to my God, and just said, okay, if this is what it's going to be, I'm okay with that. And in that moment, I really felt a great deal of peace, and felt a warmth that truly felt as though I was being embraced in a big hug. Someone put their arms around me and said, it's going to be okay. And in that moment, I knew that it would be, even though I believed that okay meant it was going to be the end of my physical life. I still knew it was going to be okay. I didn't question. I just knew it was. And it felt like I was in that moment for a long time. And yet, at the same time, it felt instant that another set of thoughts came into my mind, which was, what about your husband? And what about your children? You have a little boy who's only 2 years old. And if you leave this world, he is not even going to remember his mother. And that thought came really strongly to me. And the desire to be able to raise that son and to raise those children, and to almost send a message to my husband that, I don't know how much of this is my choice, but if it's my choice, I'm going to choose to fight and stay. And so in that moment, I did. And this renewed commitment that, nope, you're going to live. You're going to live, you're going to stay, and you're going to fight. And we still didn't know what was wrong with me, and there were still all the alarms and everything happening. But it wasn't very long before the right person came into the room with the right set of expertise, who happened to be a student, a resident who came in and had just recently read a textbook that mentioned something about a certain condition that was very rare, but that it could occur after brain surgery. And he just had this idea that we needed to test for a condition called pneumocephalus, which is air on the brain, meaning where the fluid was getting out, there was a hole and air was able to get in. So they rushed me down. They didn't even take me out of my bed. They kept me in my bed, rushed me down, scooted me onto this board, and put me directly into a CT machine where they did another scan of my brain, and they were able to figure out almost instantly that was the problem, and that was what was taking my life. And it's crazy because everything had been going downhill for days and days, and they had been trying everything and all these complicated things, and I had more IVs and things sticking out of my body and things being rushed into my veins. And yet the solution for pneumocephalus is actually a very, very simple one, and that's pure oxygen. And so as soon as they knew what the problem was, then they knew how to treat the problem, which is another thing that I think I've learned a lot from, that we need to know what it is that we're fighting in our lives. We need to know what it is that we're trying to accomplish, because that is what tells us what our next steps are. And whether it's with health, whether it's with going to school, whether it's in relationships, you need to know what it is that you're trying to do. Because you cannot accomplish something when you don't know what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And in this case, we could not fight an enemy that we didn't know who that enemy was or what was happening. And so as soon as they realized what was going on, they were able to put me back in the neuro ICU unit and give me this pure oxygen. And within 12 hours, my condition had calmed enough that they knew I was at least immediately out of risk, but I still had this spinal fluid leak and some of these other problems. But I was calmed down enough that then the doctors felt confident that they could go in and do another surgery, which they hoped would solve the other issues. So they went in and did an experimental procedure that had only been done 3 times before, 3 or 4 times before. And yet, the person who pioneered the surgery happened to be at the hospital working with the neurosurgeon that I worked with. And so I see those things and just think, okay, I just don't believe in coincidences anymore. I believe that there are things that are put in our ways for specific reasons, and we got to do something with that when it happens. So they did this experimental procedure, and they went in actually through my nose, and using a needle and thread approach, they sewed all of anything that looked remotely like it could have been a hole. They sewed all the holes closed in hopes of sealing the leak. That also meant that they sealed my eustachian tube in my ear, which has had some long-lasting implications. I cannot pop my ears anymore. I cannot adjust. I cannot pressurize. But it did accomplish what they wanted to accomplish, and they were able to seal the spinal fluid leak. It took several days for us to know whether or not it was successful, because there was some spinal fluid that was left in my system that still leaked out over a few days. But within about a week's period of time, they realized that no more was leaking out. And so that was kind of the final thing that they were hoping for. Once that leak was sealed, and I was able to get strong enough, then they said I'd be able to go home.
Wow, going home. I mean...
And I wanted to go home. I wanted to go home. And that was when I really started advocating for myself. When I could see that home was near, then I started saying to people, all right, physical therapist, let's get going on this. You nurse, no. We're not going. Don't baby me. I need a coach. I need someone who's going to come in and help me. And I realized I had more control over myself and my situation than I thought I did. And all of the people in the hospital were there to help me, but I realized some could help me more in that state than others. And so I began being very vocal and saying, I would call up the nurse's station and say, I'm grateful for such and so-and-so's help, but this is not the person I need right now on my side. I need you to send me a different nurse who can do X, Y, and Z. And I don't know that I ever would have had the guts to do that. I don't even think I knew that it was an option. I think I just thought...
You just take what you get.
You just take what you get. And I realized, no, you have say, and you can take control over the situation to help yourself. And that's when I really started advocating for myself and asking and pushing and realizing that if ever I was going to get home to those kids, to be that mom and to be that wife, that I needed to take more control of my body as well as of the circumstance I was in at the hospital, that I wasn't going to just assume that people were doing the right thing for me. I was going to make sure, and I was going to have a say in it, and they were going to talk to me, and they were going to understand what I was going through and what I needed them to understand about how I was feeling, so that we were all more on the same page, and everyone was looking out for me in the most appropriate circumstances.
Well, I think just listening to the last, little bit of that progression of going from that place of just really being ready, thinking that it was the end, and really feeling like you didn't have a voice and that you were just observing what was around you, to going forward to that moment where you're expecting, taking control. I mean, that is a beautiful transition, and to be able to hear from you what the turning point was with that experience of that peace and that hug and the you're going to be okay. And it was so interesting to hear you say that, because I had a very similar experience with my divorce, in feeling a death in a way of, a 20-year marriage. And I had a very similar experience where I felt that peace, and I felt that hug, and I felt that message of, you're going to be okay. And for me, it was a little bit different. It was more of a, you need to let go instead of you need to fight. And so it looked a little different, but I can identify with that being a turning point in my life that allowed me to figure out, okay, well, what do I have control over, and what can I do to move forward? And so I really appreciate you sharing that, and I'm sure people can feel that energy, and they can feel that the difference and see that, to be able to see that even in the way that you're even speaking and expressing, and hearing that progression, and knowing you wanted to get home. You wanted to get home. You wanted to be able to get to your children. And I know it's been, since you've been home, it's been many, many years, and there's been a lot of things that have happened in your life. And you also talked about knowing what the problem was and the enemy was. And I know that you have a couple books that we have them with us. We can show you the books. Sorry, people are just listening, but Jodi has written 2 different books, The Sun Still Shines and Rise Above Depression. So I would love for you, you're talking about knowing what you're fighting against, and knowing that, and talking about this depression. I'd love for you to share with us, in the remainder of time that we have, of what did that look like for you, and how were you able to identify that as something that you needed to fight, and then maybe some of the things that really helped you and that you've learned lately.
I really believed when I left the hospital that meant I was going to be better.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And that turned out to be just the first step in my recovery and healing, and didn't go back to my normal. What ended up happening was that I realized I had to discover a new normal.
Yes.
And I have now a second chance at life, and so I had to start figuring out what that second life was going to look like. And that second life has been a heck of a lot harder than I anticipated. I went in thinking we were going to get it taken care of and everything was going to go back to the way it had been. The reality has been that most of the symptoms that I had going in, the dizzy spells, the vertigo, the major headaches, are things that I still live with to this day. They believe that the tumor had been there long enough that it had already done the damage to the nerves, that by the time they removed it, the damage was already done. And so while the surgery and the removal of the tumor took away the immediate threat to my life, it did not take away the challenges that had been put in front of me.
So difficult to be able to just have that realization. And
I didn't know it immediately because I was still on enough medications and different things that I didn't understand that. And then when we started trying to figure out, okay, what's normal going to look like, and what's my day going to look like, and can I take care of myself? And my mother had moved into our home and was taking care of my kids for a long time, and when she moved out, and I said, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to do this, and I'm ready to start taking care of myself again, and I want to be able to take care of my family. And when that help stepped away and I realized I was in charge again, it was great, but it was also really overwhelming, and it was difficult because I realized that the things that had gotten me into the hospital were still there, and this time they weren't going to go away. So it came to a point of just trying to figure out what my new life looked like. And for someone who was as active and involved and just on the go as I was, it was a much slower, different pace. And then the mental challenges of dealing with something very physical, and something physical that people can see. Because even once my hair was coming back in, and when that part of me looked normal again, my paralysis on my face has remained. And that's something that people... I'm so much better now than I was years ago, but that's something that people still see. And going out into the world, in the beginning, especially when my eye was big, wide open, and my mouth was kind of drooping and looked like my skin was sliding off my face, people have a very instant reaction to that. And you always know the moment that they see you because you can see the reaction. You can see it in their face. And it almost always looks the same, which is there's a double take like, whoa, what did I just see? And they look again to get a better look. And then you can almost see whether or not it's something that they accept or whether they feel sorry for you or whether they want to reach out and, reach out to you. And then the next few moments always told me kind of what was to come. And some of those experiences were incredibly difficult and heartbreaking at the way that people treated me because I had always, frankly, I'd always been treated really well, which is a good thing. And I couldn't imagine that something physical would be cause for people to treat me so poorly. Those moments were hard. And so we did everything we could to try and fix some of those things. I've had 9 reconstructive surgeries now.
9.
I have a mechanical spring implanted into my eyelid that helps me a little bit to blink. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than I was without it. I've gone to years worth of therapy. I've run marathons with my facial muscles, trying to rebuild and strengthen them. But it's been a battle to make sure that coming out of it, I still had some personal identity and some personal purpose. Because no one had ever questioned that about me, and I had never questioned that about me. But when I laid in bed and struggled with headaches and was down for days at first and then weeks and then months at a time, I started having those thoughts that went through my head. Well, if I'm laying here and someone else is taking care of my kids and taking them to school and making the meals, what am I still here for? And I mistakenly believed that my ability to do things was related to my worth as a person. And my kids have been really good at helping me get over that. They have shown me time and time again that they want me around just as me, even if I'm not able to do anything, even if we're just sitting at home watching a movie, even if it means that they're getting themselves ready and off to school and they come in and, say good morning and stay tucked in bed, Mom. We'll be okay getting ourselves out the door. But they always come in and say goodbye to me. And it's taken me a long time to get to the point where I've been okay with that. And some of the moments in between were dark and they were hard. And I really questioned, why did I make it through? There's got to be reasons that I'm still here. And I got to make something of that. And I guess part of learning to advocate for myself in the hospital, I was really good at it for a while. And then as I started to feel in a weakened state again, and as I realized this was not the end of my struggles, but really the beginning of my struggles, I rode the roller coasters of emotion over and over again and got to a point where I had to really start advocating for myself again and start believing in myself and start doing something proactive to be a part of the solution. And so when I realized that I was experiencing depression and I realized I was having some of these negative thoughts, my first thought was, oh my gosh, is this what people go through? This is a really, really tough thing. And it was something that until that point in time, I really didn't understand. And I had written off in some ways and kind of pushed it aside as, oh, come on, just get up and start going. And I saw it from a whole different perspective. And a couple of years ago, a very, very strong thought and impression came to me that rather than waiting again, like I did in the hospital, for someone else to take care of me or to solve the problem or to fix things, that I needed to be more proactive, advocate for myself, and I needed to be part of the solution. And I decided at that point I was going to write a book. And I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not an expert as far as the world is concerned, but I know that there are hundreds and thousands of people out there who struggle, and they're experts in their own ways because they deal with it in a way that they live it, and they fight it, and they battle it. And so one of the realizations I had was that we need to be part of the solution to our own problems, but then also to the problems that are facing the larger world. So while I knew that my struggle with depression was, one example, I did know that all these other people were struggling also. And I had a very distinct moment where I felt like I should write this book. And immediately my thought was, no, I don't want to write a book about depression. That would be so depressing. And I just don't know if I can do that. And I don't want to admit to the world that this is something that I have faced. And then again, when I thought about it, I thought, okay, maybe this is something I'm supposed to do. Maybe this is something I can do. And in the moment that I accepted the challenge, then I immediately thought, okay, well, what is this supposed to look like? What will this be? And in my mind, I can still see where I was. I was sitting in the car. We were on a long drive coming home from California, lots of hours of just internal contemplating. And I said in my mind, what is this supposed to look like? And in that moment, I got a very clear picture, which is now part of the cover of the book, which is that the word depression contains within it two other words. And those two words are press on. And I had seen the word depression thousands of times in my life, but I had never seen it like that until that moment. And I realized I can press on, others can press on, and we can all help each other through it. And it was so amazing. I knew I just had to do it. So I actually had the cover of the book designed before I'd written a single word because I didn't want to lose the image that I had. I didn't want to lose that vision. And I knew if I made that commitment, if we went forward and did this, that it would give me something to work toward, and that I too could be part of, the solution. And so then I started reaching out and asking people to submit their stories and their tips and their ideas and give encouragement and be part of the solution. Let's all help each other, because that's one of the big things is I did not get through, and my family did not get through our struggles because of what we did. It was all of the people around us, the people that came in with those unique perspectives and those sets of expertise. It was the village. It was the village stepping in to help us. And I think that's exactly the way that we need to look at depression. And we've faced a huge increase in suicide in our country and suicide attempts. And I think that the way that we have to approach it is not as though it's his problem or her problem, but this is something that we're all facing and fighting together. And we need to acknowledge it. We need to embrace that it's happening so that we can all link arms and help each other and be the village for everyone who needs help at any given moment.
I love that. And I love that image, the linking arms, that being that village, being that for each other. And it does require a lot out of ourselves. It requires us to admit to whether that's something that we're experiencing or that someone else is experiencing, and being willing to talk about something uncomfortable. It involves being educated. There's so many different things that are involved in becoming a part of that village. And I am so grateful for people like you and other people that we've had on the podcast who are so willing to open up and share their own personal stories, to be able to give a voice to these things that are happening, to help people to know that they're not alone, that they can be a part of the solution, they can be a part of the village, and there is hope, and that there are opportunities for them to learn from other people and to press on together. And that I just love that so much. And I know that there are going to be people that are listening today that are just saying, thank you, Jodi. Thank you so much for choosing to stay, for pressing on in that moment, in that hospital room where you had to come to that decision and really making that choice to stay. And, on the beautiful life that you've created in the hard times and through that, and then being willing to have that voice and being part of the solution. So where can somebody reach out to you? Where can they find more if they want to learn more from you and read your books? What are some great ways for them to connect?
I'm on most of the social media outlets. Probably I'm most active on my Facebook page, which is writer and presenter Jodi Brown. Or you can reach out to me personally. I'm on there as Jodi Orgill Brown. And then I'm also on Instagram, same thing, Jodi Orgill Brown. My email is authorjodibrown@gmail.com. And I love to hear from people. I love to hear their stories. I love to hear the ways that, their village has helped keep them going, or the ways which they've, taken control and helped themselves and their family members, or maybe the way that they need someone to help them in that moment. Because, you learn a lot when you go through it, and you learn resources, and you learn, what kind of help is really needed, and what someone might be facing at that point in time. And so I love to help other people and hopefully give them a little bit of hope, and know that this might seem unconquerable, but there is no such thing as impossible, especially when you're surrounded by people who are determined that they're going to help you fight and help you win.
Oh, well, I love that, and I know that you've given hope today, and there are going to be so many people that are inspired who've been able to watch and listen with us. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here today.
I don't think we planned on ending up in tears.
No, no, but I'm sure people can just feel your energy and feel that hope, and feel that triumph too. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Okay, and friends, thank you so much for being with us on this episode of the Life Beats Project.